Councilmember Mike Bonin. Today is Tuesday, February 18th. Thank you for joining us, and those listening on Council Audio, thank you for joining us as well. With that, we have two items on today's agenda. I'd like to take item number 2 on consent, if you're okay with that, Mr. Bonin.
Yes.
Okay, without an objection, we'll take item number 2 and approve item 2 and send that to council. Any general public comment while we're here?
A couple on item 2.
Okay, no, so we'll close general public comment. Oh, one general
Council
public.
members John White, City Clerk, you have one speaker card submitted for general public comment.
Okay. If you can send that to me, Dennis, I don't see it. Oh, Jeff Nashman? Jeff,
Yes, right here.
please come forward on a non-agenda item.
No, I'm sorry.
You want to speak on item 2?
It's on the tourism.
Perfect. So item number 2.
Okay.
Okay, we'll just move him to item number 2, so we'll close general public comment.
Yeah, item 1.
I'm sorry, item number 1. Okay. Okay, so with that, let us now take item number 1. If you can,
Comments for 2.
oh, we do have 2.
It's just public comment.
We have cars on 2?
We do.
Okay, so we have to reconsider item 2. Is there Gwen Slaughter here to speak on item number 2? Sorry? Submitted in error. Okay, Jacob Huaregi?
That was supposed to be for item 1.
Roger that. Okay,
Sorry.
no problem. Okay, so we'll back to item number 1. If you can read that into the record, please.
Sir, item 1, City Attorney and Los Angeles Department of Transportation reports and ordinance adding section 80.36.11 to Los Angeles Municipal Code, making it unlawful to operate a tour bus on any street LADOT has determined unsafe for tour bus operation. Also, committee members, I have submitted for your consideration recommendations for the committee today's meeting. They are item 1, or recommendation number 1, adopt the draft ordinance dated August 2nd, 2019. Number 2, request the city attorney prepare and present amendments in a separate ordinance that require LADOT obtain city council approval prior to restricting streets for tour bus operations. Number 3, substantially concur with the recommendations of the Transportation Committee as amended to delete Warrant 4 from the tour bus prohibition criteria inasmuch as overgrown vegetation is an existing violation of LAMC 56.08. 4, direct LADOT to post a map on its website of all streets where tour buses are restricted and revise and update the map as additional streets are added. Number 5, direct LAPD to issue warnings in lieu of citations for 30 days following the installation of tour bus restriction signs by LADOT. And lastly, number 6, revise recommendation number 4 of the LADOT report to read, Section A, direct LADOT to work with tour bus operators to identify and provide locations for tour bus routes, loading and unloading zones, holding areas, and to make any additional recommendations to mitigate the traffic impacts of tour bus operations and to help improve the visitor experience for tour bus passengers, and to report back to council in 90 days.
Thank you, Mr. Clerk. With that, we do have cards on this item. On item number 1, representing Mr. Rue's office, Justin Ornstein, please come forward. Followed by Jason Lieber. If you can, Jason, please come forward and find a mic. Jason will be followed by Stephen Bauer. Please come forward. There's Stephen. Please come forward. Justin.
Mr. Chair, thank you for the opportunity to make a few brief remarks. I'd first like to thank you and your staff for working with our office to help craft what we believe is a well thought out and effective ordinance. I'd also like to thank Councilmember Bonin and the members of the Transportation Committee for your previous consideration of the matter. I'd like to thank Brian Gallagher and the teams at DOT and the City Attorney's Office who've worked tirelessly to get us to where we are. And last but not least, I'd like to extend the council members' sincere thanks to all the stakeholders, the Hollywood Hills residents and the Hollywood Hills West Neighborhood Council among them, who've been engaged in this process from the start. On that note, I'd also like to preface my remarks by stating that it was important for our office and DOT to meet with any and all interested stakeholders, including members of the tour bus industry, and we appreciate the input they've provided. Every day, hundreds of tour buses wind up and down narrow hillside streets that simply weren't built for this kind of use. During a recent manual account conducted by DOT to verify roadways where safety issues exist, nearly 200 buses were seen traveling through the neighborhoods over a 6-hour period from 10 a.m. to 4 p.m. And during the summer months, the number of tour buses is often higher. We've seen numerous collisions, accidents, injuries to tour bus passengers, and traffic violations created by buses making unsafe turns, illegal U-turns, speeding, slowing, or suddenly stopping while traveling on narrow hillside streets. Based on the size, weight, and frequency with which they travel through residential neighborhoods, these buses pose a very real threat to public safety. With that said, I'd like to note that Councilmember Ryu in our office is supportive of the additional recommendations being made, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you.
There's a rep from Hollywood Hills Neighborhood Council. Should have him go next.
Okay. Is there a representative from the Hollywood Neighborhood Council? Please come forward. Your name, ma'am?
Anastasia Mann. I'm the president.
Thank you so much.
I did fill out a form.
Okay. So you'll be given 4 minutes
Sure.
representing the neighborhood council. Normally it's 1 minute, but because you have you're representing, and you have a community impact statement?
We have many files.
Okay.
Yes, thank you. Thank you.
So go ahead, the floor is
All
yours.
right.
4 minutes.
Well, thank you very much, all of you, for hearing this subject. And I say that with sadness and distress in my heart that this has come to this situation. The stakeholders within the Hollywood Hills West Neighborhood Council, which is the largest in the city, have been not only dealing with this for almost 7 years now, but so have the transient community, the commuters and everyone in Los Angeles and visitors have been dealing with this also. And it has become not just a quality of life issue for people, but it's primarily a safety issue. And I just want to emphasize the fact that the last time I spoke at a hearing, several members of the tour bus community made reference they claimed that they had not been knowledgeable about what was going on or given opportunity to speak. And I just want to put on the record, and this is verifiable, that we have had 3 separate public town halls over the last 7 years, the most recent being in the last, we had one last year, we had one the year before. We had over 500 people, including representatives of probably half of the tour bus operators in the city. Some of them had attorneys there. I was actually threatened by an attorney that I would be personally sued for pursuing this subject. And we have had many very thoughtful tour bus operators coming to some of our neighborhood council meetings to address it. All of our neighborhood council meetings are transparent and open to the public. All of our agendas are posted, in fact, in advance of the Brown Act 72-hour period. Anybody can go onto our websites and sign up to receive information about our meetings and our notices, as you all will know. But it's gone beyond the point of acceptance in our community. The streets are breaking down. We have been covering our streets with asphalt for a number of years now, and the asphalt is breaking down. The weight of these vehicles completely exceeds 6,000 pounds, and most of our small streets are limited to that. In some cases, it's over 14,000 pounds. We have actual photographs and videos of tour buses exploding. One right at the view side over the Hollywood Bowl on Mulholland actually blew up once the passengers got off. I actually went up there, I live near there, and passengers lost all their belongings, passports, money, everything was lost. There was another one at the same time that happened north of Sunset in the Bel Air Beverly Crest Neighborhood Council area. And I have talked to tour bus operators. I've called and spoken to dispatch people to report serious safety violations. And the drivers are committing, and this particular dispatch person said to me, it doesn't matter, we don't care if they get tickets, we don't care, we have 100 people lined up to take these jobs. So it's time actually for the operators and owners of these tour operations to take responsibility and be held accountable for this behavior. It's just gone on long enough. I've heard all kinds of comments. LAPD has testified, they've heard comments. It's just gone on long enough. And the reality is now it's safety first. I have been in the tourism industry for 40 plus years. I'm a leader of the California tourism industry. I am one of the founders of the California Travel and Tourism Commission in Sacramento that is now Visit California. I love tourism. I care about tourism, but I care about good, safe tourism that protect our visitors. What's going on now does not protect our visitors. On the way here today, I passed 3 tour buses on Mulholland Drive that were illegally parked, creating danger, letting people out to take pictures at an illegal parking spot, no parking, no stopping, where people could have been hit and killed. These tourists are being put in danger. And it's not worth it. We want to protect our city. We want to protect the value of tourism in our city. It means everything to the Hollywood brand. We have to protect it, and we have to protect our visitors. We have to protect our residents. And thank you very much.
Thank you, and thank you for your service to our city and our state. Appreciate your testimony. Jason Lieber? Jason?
Yes, my name is Jason Lieber. I represent Starline Tours. We did submit public comment in a letter, and it reflects and almost echoes, in some ways verbatim, the public comments submitted by the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce. I want to first thank Department of Transportation, specifically Brian Gallagher, for giving us his time a few weeks ago, and thank Councilman Rue's office, specifically Nick Grief, and the speaker here today for their time in helping us, and at least keeping us informed throughout the process. Starline is a law-abiding company and desperately wants regulation. We simply want it done the right way. We would request 2 things. First, we'd like a meeting with members of this council or their staff. We met with DOT effectively and discussed the substantive issues with respect to what streets should be regulated and the criteria. We need a chance to discuss 4 major issues that relate to the procedural issues and make this ordinance, they will make this ordinance effective. We'd like a short delay in a short meeting where we can briefly express our concerns. Sorry for going over.
Sorry, thank you. Stephen Bauer? Is there Cynthia High? Please come forward to this open mic. And then Alyssa Jordan, please come forward if you're here. Go ahead, sir. 1 minute. By the way, I want to welcome Paul Krikorian, council member. Thank you for joining us. Go ahead.
I'm Steve Bauer with Ultimate Hollywood Tours, and we are the 2nd largest tour company behind Starline in the city. My conversation today really is related to tourism more than the conversation about transportation. We've been there already. The streets that have less than 6,000-pound weight limits should be being enforced now, and if they're not, this regulation would certainly do that. My question and comment really is on Mulholland Drive, which everyone's going to talk about. It's not a 6,000-pound limit. There are 6,000-pound tour buses on there or under, which is what our fleet is, but there's also 70,000-pound waste management garbage trucks on there. There are cement trucks on there that are 60,000 pounds in weight limit. There are many vehicles that travel on Mulholland Drive that are much larger than ours. Hard to imagine that we are more of a safety issue than vehicles of that size. I think that's the concern. We shouldn't be on the small streets, but we shouldn't be blocked off of the main street that carries people across the city.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cynthia High?
Hello. I'm Cynthia High. I'm the treasurer of the Los Angeles Tour Guide Association. And we would like to urge you to continue to work on the details of the ordinance. There are, we believe, some problems that you perhaps have not foreseen. We want to let you know that we are committed to following the rules and being good partners. That's partly why we formed this organization in the first place. But there are a few things that really concern us about this ordinance. It still doesn't mention enforcement for the homeowners. We're thinking there really should be like some kind of a hotline or some way that they can to facilitate the enforcement. I think it's very frustrating for them right now because it's almost impossible to enforce the existing rules that we have. For my group of small tour operators, one of our main concerns is that it actually gets rid of the 6,000-pound limit, and by doing that, you're excluding some really small operators with SUV, like 5 and 7 passenger SUVs. Thank you.
Thank you. Alyssa Jordan?
Hi.
Hold on, Alyssa. Can I welcome to the microphone, is there Daniel DeVincentis? Yeah. Followed by Paul Golding, please come forward. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Elisa Jordan, and it's an honor to be here and meet you, see you again. I am an independent tour guide. I'm also the secretary of the Los Angeles Tour Guide Association. And I'm here because I have a lot of the same concerns that everyone else here does. I do think that there are some safety concerns. However, I think the ordinance as it reads now is overreaching. It would kind of like the class clown gets in trouble, so the entire class gets detention is kind of what we're looking at here. It's overreaching, so we're not asking there to be no rules or regulations. We're asking it to be enforced as it was originally written, because the way it is written now, tour guides who are small, who are not breaking the rules, are going to be punished, and in turn that punishes the tourists who come to Los Angeles. And as we know, a lot of them are disappointed that they miss out.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having me here today. We've had many meetings for years now, and there's
Your name for the record, I'm
sorry, Daniel
Dan-
DeVincentis. There's a
Thank you.
Groundhog Day quality to them. Residents come forward about this wildly dangerous nuisance and our quiet neighborhoods, and the tour bus operators promise to police themselves. We have endless photo and video evidence for many years of the constant dangerous stopping in the middle of blind turns on Mulholland, waiting to get T-boned, cigarettes at the overlooks, even these tour operators mocking the residents and yelling at residents for the entertainment of the tourists. It's totally crazy. It's the Wild West on Mulholland. Self-policing has been non-existent. Whack-a-mole enforcement from the LAPD is ineffective, not to mention insulting to the force. The attitude of the operators is, hell with the law, LAPD doesn't have the manpower to catch us. One of them said this out loud in a meeting we had. There's going to be a terrible and fatal accident if this environment continues on Mulholland Drive. It's guaranteed. No one will be able to say that they didn't see it coming. We need these vehicles banned from our quiet residential neighborhoods. Thank you.
Thank you. Here, hold on, Paul. Christina O'Neill, please come forward. David Benz, please come forward. Mr. Golding?
Gentlemen, I've asked the clerk to give you a visual aid referencing what I'm going to say. My name is Paul Golding. I'm a board member for the Upper Nichols Canyon Neighborhood Association. Everyday tour buses looking for celebrity homes come to a dead stop on Mulholland, which is a two-lane road. Other drivers behind them must make an unexpected stop themselves or cross the double yellow line, which you can see in the photos, to go around the buses. Tour buses regularly block the road at blind curves, intersections, driveways, and encourage other drivers to pass them. Now these tour buses have begun driving onto smaller streets where there's even less room and less visibility. A bad accident is inevitable. The Department of Transportation must be given permission to regulate their behavior. The bottom right photo was taken yesterday. The two Starline vans, the company you just heard was law-abiding, are loaded with tourists perched on a 30-foot downhill slope with no guardrail. It's also a no-stopping zone. If I'd been even close to the legal speed limit, I could have easily rear-ended them. Every day these things happen. You can see these photos and many worse examples on Instagram at too many tour buses. I encourage you to look and to please pass this ordinance. Thank you.
Thank you. Christina O'Neill?
Hi, gentlemen. My name is Christine O'Neill, and I'm the Vice President of the Lake Hollywood Homeowners Association. We're a small community of 120 homes and live directly underneath the Hollywood sign, so you can imagine. As a homeowner and stakeholder of the estates, we have, for about 24 years now, I've strongly expressed over the years the increasingly unlawful behavior and utter disrespect these tour companies have for the communities they take their patrons to. Their tours of Los Angeles hillsides and their general disrespect to Angelinos is not the way the Los Angeles Tourism and Convention Board wants to promote LA as a destination city for business and leisure travel. The drivers are non-compliant to hillside laws and regulations on smoking as drivers themselves stop to take smoke breaks and encourage passengers to do the same. We have video. They blatantly ignore hours of operation, including early morning and nighttime tours. Additionally, they ignore hillside and neighborhood noise ordinances using their amplified communication system without providing headsets. They speed, illegally pass other vehicles over double yellow lines, ignore traffic signs. They create gridlock, and we're asking you to please support this ordinance.
Thank you, ma'am. Sure. David Benz? There's Stacy Sillins. Please come forward.
I'm David Benz, President of Lake Hollywood Homeowners Association. Our board of directors, and I think it's safe to say that our entire community of 131 homes supports this ordinance. If you Google the best place to see the Hollywood sign, our neighborhood's Pocket Park is rated #1. Our area is inundated with motorists coming to see the sign. This causes a major public safety problem for us. In normal traffic, it would take me 15 minutes to get from my home to the emergency room at Kaiser on Sunset Boulevard. In peak tourist periods, the same trip could take 45 minutes. A resident or a visitor could die of a stroke or a heart attack while waiting for an ambulance. Visitors in private cars are, of course, the major part of the problem, but tour buses exacerbate this major safety problem. And then, of course, fire trucks coming to save our homes and our lives could be stuck behind one of these buses. We are working very closely with Councilperson Rue's office to find workable solutions. Banning buses from the narrow streets that one must traverse in order to reach our neighborhood is one component to a holistic solution of our very real public safety problem. Thank you.
Thank you for your presence and your testimony. Appreciate that. Stacy Sillins? I don't see a Stacy.
She's stuck in traffic, I believe.
Okay, can we phone her in? Just kidding. Is there a Gavin Martin? Please come forward, Gavin. Jeff? Oh, Stacy, that was, all right. You beat traffic. Come on forward.
That's how you make an entry.
That's right. Gavin Martin's at the mic. How about Jeff Strelbler? Stacy, I'll give you a minute to get your breath, catch your breath here.
Thank you.
Gavin, why don't you go first?
Good afternoon, Councilman. My name is Gavin Martin. I've lived in the neighborhood below Mulholland near the Hollywood sign for 22 years with my wife. And I urge you to consider the fact that the Hollywood sign has been here for nearly 100 years, and tour operators have been in the city for many, many years. It's only been in the last few years, I'd say 4 or 5, that they've started coming up in droves to the Hollywood sign. Also because tourists are doing that too. And I understand the operators talk about penalizing tourists and penalizing tour companies. But what about penalizing people who have lived there and paid money to actually develop communities over years and years and years? They also talk about weight limits and things like garbage trucks. I'm surprised he didn't mention fire engines breaking the limit too. This is not an issue about weight limit on streets for me. It's personally the fact that I have to break the law every day when I go home because I have to cross that double yellow line, which is a violation of the code in California. Sorry, I can't go on.
You're good. Thank you. Stacy?
Hi there. First, thank you for this. I'm sure you've heard, I don't know what you've heard so far about all of the infractions, but I want to just tell you a personal story, which is why I rushed here today. So both my husband and I were both in accidents, my husband with a tour bus and me because of a tour bus. And so I want you to understand that this is personal. At the same time, my husband was on Mulholland Drive and a tour bus operator pulled out of a street holding a microphone. Remember that we have to be hands-free, holding a microphone, looking in the other direction and pulled out, and my husband wasn't able to stop in time. Luckily, my husband did not get hurt. Our car, unfortunately, did not suffer the same fate. For me, because of what he talked about going over the double yellow line, when the tour buses go so slowly, because they're giving tours, people get frustrated, so a car pulled out. I was there. So my back is still not well. I go every week for physical therapy. I can't take care of my 14-year-old dog. So these are real stories about real things. We're not mean, awful people, but there are real, truly safety issues here, which I know you hear a lot about today. So thank you.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. Is there a Kathy Painter? Please come forward and find an empty chair, followed by Jacob Warhegi. And Jeff?
Hi, Jeff
Good
Strabler,
afternoon.
Transportation Chair, Hollywood Hills West Neighborhood Council. Thank you, council members, for allowing me to speak. I just wanted to advise you on the history of the tour bus operators of failing to behave in a safe manner. In particular, they repeatedly block traffic lanes on blind curves and encourage vehicles to pass them. They repeatedly make illegal left-hand turns on a blind curve at Mulholland and to enter the Hollywood Bowl overlook. They repeatedly make illegal left-hand turns onto Mulholland, where it's a blind curve, to exit the Hollywood Bowl overlook. They repeatedly discharge passengers into traffic while illegally stopped. And they repeatedly block the Pacific View Trail egress into Mulholland, which is also on a blind curve. They have little regard for anyone's safety, including their passengers. And so I fully support the implementation of this ordinance.
Thank you. Is it Kathy?
Hi, my name's Kathy Painter, and I've lived up in Nichols Canyon for 24 years. And I've been saying for years that this is just an accident waiting to happen. I've witnessed so many near misses. And then on Sunday, I was driving on Mulholland, going to run some errands between Woodrow Wilson and Wrightwood. And a tour bus right in front of me stopped in the middle of the street, not once, but twice. I mean, not even a, slowly slowing down or a put on their hazards. I was like, good grief. I mean, putting all those people at risk and then putting the neighbors at risk. So, again, It is. It's an accident waiting to happen, and something has to be done. So I'm here to support changes.
Thanks for your testimony. Jacob?
Committee
afternoon.
members, on behalf of the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and the more than 800 members it represents, I'm here to express our conditional support for the proposed tour bus route restrictions ordinance. We fully understand the need to address public safety concerns and are in favor of regulating the operation of tour buses in the city. However, the tour bus route restrictions ordinance, as it currently is written, contains provisions that are of great concern to the Hollywood Chamber of Commerce and our tour bus operator members. We have submitted our letter that outlined 4 key issues with legislation, which includes the clarity on whether individual persons or business entities would be criminally liable for fourth or subsequent violations of the ordinance, as well as priorable violations of the statute as they are accumulated, and the amendments which contain no notice provisions that would make tour bus companies aware of newly restricted routes. We also have issues with the process itself in terms of giving LADOT a unilateral decision to create the criteria without testing it before this ordinance goes into effect. Thank you.
Thank you. Our final speaker is Helena Poland. Why don't you come forward, sir? Come forward, sir. No, we had you fill out a card on item 2, but I know we had you down.
Ready?
Ma'am?
Good afternoon, everyone. I am Helena Poland. I represent the Outpost Neighborhood Association, primarily Outpost through the Hollywood Bowl. We are also incredibly concerned in our neighborhood about the increase in traffic, although some majority comes from the constant of the tour buses, which are frequent during the day, especially on weekends, every 10 minutes, every 5 minutes, lines of them. This weekend, there was a tour bus stopped directly on Mulholland right after the Overlook, and I have pictures that I sent to Officer Sanchez of the cars passing the double line to head down during the blind curves. Notwithstanding, there are now sort of many homes turning over because of the aging of residents. We have an increase now of small children. The traffic on Outpost, specifically as well as the Hollywood Bowl throughputs, have increased five times over the last 10 years, making it incredibly dangerous in our community. We support the passing of this ordinance.
Thank you. Your name for the record again, sir?
Thank you. My name is Jeff Napshin. I'm the owner of Star Trek Tours in Hollywood. Listen, folks, let me tell you, first of all, there's some big news coming our way. We are looking at a potential drop in tourism because of what's happening right now in Asia, heading this way. And it's going to cause thousands of less tourists a year. And what you're doing right now could have a further impact on that. I don't think we want that. There are problems. We're all talking about ways we can help out. The smaller streets, I think most of the tourists agree, some of those smaller streets are problems that should be restricted. But major streets like Mulholland Drive are critically important to the visitors to this area, and they have to be kept open. Now, let me tell you, I have a couple ideas that I think would help solve this problem. I've spoken to Brian about those in the past. Ideas having to do with the size of vehicles and areas along Mulholland and those routes where we could possibly pull over and not block the road. Real ideas that could help. If you haven't had a chance to actually do a tour, and God knows I hope you have if you're going to vote on it, I'd like to personally offer you to join our tour. I have some information on the house and a chance to see what we do, and so you can see where those problems are and we can see how they can be solved.
Thank you. Thanks for your testimony. It's a good segue, too. I already went up and I'll share my story. My son texts me and says his friend Faith wants to go see the Hollywood sign. It's about a month ago. I go, this is perfect. It gives me an opportunity to see what's happening firsthand. Sure enough, I went on Google, went to the map, so found my way up these narrow roads, went through a number of neighborhoods, noticed a number of tour vans and buses, and we actually ended up at that park among 50 or 60 other vehicles. Faith took her selfie in front of the Hollywood sign. Then we went down and enjoyed Hollywood Boulevard. And it was clearly there are some challenges in and around the Hollywood sign area and the neighborhoods that are being impacted. And it was important for me to see that firsthand. Also, it was important to, as a chair of this committee, to understand why people come to the city. It's Hollywood, it's entertainment, and be able to see that Hollywood sign that they've seen on TV, both here in the country and beyond. And they wanted to get as close as Hollywood as possible. So it's important to have that striking balance. And I know the chairman of the Transportation Committee who's here with us, Mr. Bond, who also serves on this committee, was trying to find that balance as well. It's also important for us to be responsive to Councilmember Ryu and to his residents that he serves and he represents. And as you know, public safety is so important for us. And as a police officer for many years, I take public safety very seriously. And it's clear that there are legitimate concerns of safety issues with the operation of tour buses, especially on narrow hillside streets, which I experienced firsthand. It also concerns me that it took this city 2 years for city departments to respond to a council's request to address the safety issue. The council, the motion was to report back in 60 days, and here we are nearly 2 years later. And when the department did respond, it was not with what we requested. I'm also concerned that the draft ordinance and the tour bus prohibition criteria go a little too far and don't provide enough notice to tour bus operators when streets are restricted and don't provide a fair public process for restricting streets. That's why in one of my recommendations I wanted to issue warnings in lieu of citations for at least the first 30 days following the installation of tour bus restriction signs by the Department of Transportation. We also know that tourism, as we heard from the testimony, is one of our most important industries and most important sources of tax revenue for the city. But we also need to be responsive to the residents that are being impacted. And I believe that we as a council and a city should do all we can to support the residents and also support this industry. We also want our tourists to feel safe. We want our residents to feel safe. We should do more to work proactively and cooperatively with our partners in the private sector. And I know in this next meeting on March 8th at the Travel and Tourism Committee, the Convention and Tourism Development Department will be presenting the city's first ever tourism master plan. I look forward to working with the department and LATCB and our private sectors, partners in implementing this plan's recommendations so that we can increase tourism and manage the impacts of tourism to our impacting neighborhoods. So with that, we have the recommendations that were read into the record by the clerk. And I do want to thank again Mr. Ryu for helping lead this effort and being responsive to his residents. And I'd like to turn it over to colleagues on the committee if they have any questions or comments. We good?
Really? Well, I do.
Mr. Krikorian.
Thank you. Unquestionably, I've heard in a variety of committees, in a great variety of contexts, the frustration of people who live in hillside communities, particularly Beechwood Canyon and other places, that have been beset by the problems that you've talked about, Mr. Chairman, and that, in fact, we have photographs of here with traffic, with people parking, with people double parking, with people not having appropriate hygiene and sanitation facilities, and sometimes despoiling neighborhoods in that way as well, and a whole variety of other very real quality of life concerns. So I have heard that for sure. I'm struggling a little bit with this ordinance because it's framed in safety terms, but I'm struggling to understand how the operation of a tour bus on a road is less safe than the operation of an Uber driver, a school bus, a trash truck, a fire truck, a delivery vehicle, or any number of other vehicles of similar size. Especially when a number of people have said, well, as it is right now, they ignore the no left turn signs, they do this and that. So I'm not sure what we're adding to the equation by prohibiting the use of a road, a public road, by a vehicle based on the function of that vehicle. as opposed to its size or other factors, which, if it's a size issue, then let's deal with size. Where I clearly see the problem, as it's been described by the public here, is in conduct of those tour operators, stopping on blind curves, double parking, all the other sorts of things, which are also specifically called out in this ordinance. That makes perfect sense to me, because that's a matter of conduct. It's a matter of how a vehicle is being operated. But I'm really, and maybe, I don't know, if Mr. Gallagher, if you can speak to this, or somebody from DOT can speak to this. Thank you. We've heard from the members of the public. I'd like to hear from the transportation planning professionals now about how we, as a city, can draft an ordinance that distinguishes on a safety basis between different uses of a particular vehicle.
Hello, Brian Gallagher, Department of Transportation. Our mission on this report was to strike a balance between safety and tourism, and we tried to come up with criteria that would focus on streets with both safety problems and frequent tour buses. We tried to zoom in on the problems that would be unique to the combination of the geometry or certain other characteristics of those streets combined with a certain amount of tour bus usage. If the streets were not safe for all vehicles in addition to tour buses, then we could already post signs making the streets, prohibited or no left turn or whatever. But in working with the Public Utilities Commission and LAPD, they indicated that for the streets that are already posted with no vehicles over 6,000 pound signs, it was very difficult for them to enforce. They said that they needed to take the bus to a different location so that they could weigh it, and they were looking for another tool similar to this that the city of San Francisco had, where we could have the signs restricted based upon the type of vehicle rather than the weight of vehicle in order to allow the police department to do better enforcement. When we crafted the criteria, we really tried to ask ourselves what would be the difference between the restriction for a truck or for a tour bus. And we tried to come up with something that would zoom in on just the tour buses. In meeting with the tour bus operators...
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt you there. Why? Your job is to determine the safe use of the street. So in distinguishing between... I get that tour buses create a huge impact on quality of life. I get that. I don't question that for a second. But I'm asking you about safety. And we're making an ordinance based on safety. So how is a tour bus less safe than an identically sized vehicle, except in the way that it operates?
We were trying to be responsive to the direction that we received from City Council to focus on the tour bus locations.
Okay.
Mike Nagel from the City Attorney's Office. This is also based on state law. State law found that a number of tour buses were operating unsafely, so they gave us the authority to regulate simply tour buses. They were well aware some of the tour buses were being modified in unsafe ways. A lot of them have removed the sides. A lot of them have removed the roofs. There were a lot of accidents, some deadly accidents involving tour buses on narrow streets, particularly in the Hollywood Hills.
Hold on, sir, please, you're out of order. Please don't disrupt this meeting.
Well, there was some incidents. Wasn't somebody decapitated?
That was not in the hills.
That wasn't in the hills, but somebody was decapitated.
Okay, so the safety issue that we're getting at here is the modification of the vehicle, the removal of the structural integrity of the roof. It creates a greater rollover danger, creates a danger of, potentially people, being ejected from the vehicle and those sorts of things.
It was also on the narrow streets in the Hollywood Hills. It was creating, as many of the citizens have complained and testified here today, creating a very dangerous situation where cars were getting backed up, people were having to make illegal U-turns, people couldn't get out of their driveways.
Right,
This
and so,
law was
I'm sorry,
designed-
so on that point, though, the same exact argument could be made about a whole variety of vehicle uses that cause the exact same impact. Wait, let me finish.
Please,
Let me
please.
finish and stop interrupting the meeting.
Please do not interrupt. Don't disrupt this meeting. You'll be asked to leave if you continue to disrupt this meeting, please.
Many of the neighborhoods in my district have been beset for years by TNC operators who are running rides through residential neighborhoods, lining up cars, one right after the other, to go and do their pickups, and causing the exact same impact. People who are using their GPS to take their shortcuts through these neighborhoods instead of staying on Coldwater Canyon or Mulholland or some of the other main throughways are causing the exact same impacts of people not being able to get out of their driveway. People, the streets being used in a way that causes congestion, which increases safety. So I again am struggling to hear a rational basis for distinguishing tour bus operators that are merely operating on the street from others. Now, when it comes to those that stop, those that block traffic, those that make illegal left turns in violation of signage, all of those other things, I get it, but that's the conduct of the operator. It's not the nature of the vehicle. So, I mean, help me with understanding how it is that the operation of a vehicle that has its side painted with one business on a street is different than the same vehicle driving down the street with a different business's name painted on it.
Well, in terms of tour buses, we're talking about streets that the department has determined are not safe for tour bus travel and other travel, as Brian has already talked about. What we're also talking about, when you mentioned TNCs, there's going to be an ordinance coming, your ordinance, in fact, I believe you introduced it, regarding the regulation of TNCs by the department to prevent those TNCs also from traveling in certain streets where they're not in the large numbers that we've seen them in unsafe streets. But that's something coming forward at a later time. But in this is a business that's going to certain areas of the city, and unfortunately there have been a lot of problems on these narrow streets that are causing a unique safety hazard. You may have a truck go up there, but it's not the same truck going up every time. It's a whole series of tour buses going up to a certain location where they know they shouldn't be, where it's not safe and behaving unsafely. And that's what this bill was aimed at. I also reviewed the questions that were asked for modifications on the ordinance. I can address that if you'd like me to do that as well.
The recommendations of the chair, you mean?
Yes, if you had any questions regarding that. I know that there were some questions regarding why are we going after the company as opposed to the individual drivers. Because it's a business, it's regulated by the PUC. The PUC makes the company liable. And that is why we're going after the companies. They have either their independent contractors or their employees that they're responsible for in terms of making sure that they're following the law. If the LAPD has to go after each individual driver, then you have got a problem getting them to comply. They'll blame it on the individual driver. If the individual driver is behaving in a way, speeding or something, then LAPD might write that individual driver an additional citation. But if they're on a street that they're not supposed to be on, then that is the company's responsibility. It doesn't matter how big they are. If they're big, they're making more money than a small operator. They need to be responsible for all of their drivers.
What's the current licensure requirement for a tour bus operator in Los Angeles?
Well, they're regulated by the Public Utilities Commission, so they receive...
Are we preempted from imposing a licensing requirement on operators here?
We're not preempted in terms of regulating what we're regulating now. The state law allows us now to regulate these. That was the...
No, I was actually going to go a step further and to suggest that if there were a franchise agreement, a licensing requirement of tour bus operators, it's not really before us today.
Right.
But then you would have much more leverage to ensure compliance with what the gentleman was saying, illegal left turns. Right. If you have a franchise that you could pull and stop the operator from operating anywhere in Los Angeles, not just in certain streets, you would have a much stronger enforcement mechanism to ensure that they are good neighbors.
That's true. I believe you and Mr. Bonin actually are moving in that direction by recommending that Los Angeles have a pilot that allows us to regulate TNCs and all these other industries currently being regulated by the PUC or not being regulated by the PUC.
Yeah.
It's what we call the Mr. Krikorian was right proposal.
Thank you, thank you. Well, our motion was not exactly directed to tour bus operators, but it seems like it might even be more urgent in this case, because it would really be a way to distinguish those who are respectful of neighborhoods and compliant with the law and those that aren't, by just pulling their right to do business at all. Not just saying you can go on that street and you can't go on that street.
Yes, you have more teeth.
Yeah.
Well, that's not before us today, but that's something that maybe we can explore in the context
Same
of
thing. There's
the other
nobody,
motion.
they permit them, but they don't enforce. There's no enforcement down here. Even though they collect the fees, you don't see enforcement.
So I think the city attorney has convinced me that there is at least a rational basis for distinguishing these from other businesses with the ordinance as it is. I still think that the emphasis of this should be in all of the things that are listed in the ordinance other than just driving down the street, the stopping and all the other issues. But I think for purposes of moving it forward, I didn't get to read all your recommendations, Mr. Chair, but seems like
they're pretty straight.
They're going in the right direction.
Would you want us to come back with a resolution, have it approved by resolution, the streets that DOT comes, that was one of the recommendations I saw there that you wanted notice.
But we want to send this to council in response to Mr. Rue's urgency on this. So. Anything else, Paul?
Was the question whether the streets that are designated themselves, that designation should be a council action as well?
Yeah, maybe you want that to be a resolution. I think
That's
where
actually a
you
great
would-
question.
Very good.
That way you'd have the public hearing, and that might be.
So you have more input.
Yeah, like the oversize, where it just comes to, I don't want to say T committee.
Oh, yeah, we want more items T committee, thanks.
No, I think I for one think the council should weigh in on that. I think because either way DOT goes on this, if they decide to include a street or exclude a street that the community wants, in either event, I think that the council is better suited to be able to hear the community and balance.
In recommendation number 2, Dennis just reminded me that we would need full city council approval prior to restricting streets for tour bus operations. That's a request we're going to put as one of the recommendations.
Okay.
Yeah. And Mr. Bonnet?
We'll talk offline.
Yeah.
Yeah, so, well, 10 minutes ago, I thought I got to be the swing vote, but I guess not. I'm supportive of the motion. I was supportive when it was in T committee. I'm supportive with the amendments. I like the other stuff Mr. Krikorian talked about and think we should probably pursue that, and I agree that we should be trying to enforce in various different ways. I do think, though, there is a difference between the tour buses and some of the other things. They differ from the vast majority of TNCs in terms of size, and they differ from a trash truck or a school bus in terms of the necessity of use. We got to get the kids to school, and we have to pick up the trash. I represent hillside areas too. And I represent areas with lots of tour buses in Venice and the canals. So I get the issue. I often deal with excessive construction trucks in my narrow hillside streets, which are a real problem. And it has been explained to me that under the state vehicle code, I have a limited ability to regulate that because it takes away people's property rights. Not wild about that decision, but I think this is a different thing from that. I don't think you have a right to run a tour bus anywhere on a street that has been otherwise deemed to be too narrow or dangerous. So, and I get why you want to have the restriction on the bus, just because one of the things that the city is just absolutely atrocious at is enforcing anything, and that provision makes the enforcement a little bit easier and clearer. You don't have to catch somebody making the illegal turn, just the presence on the street, so it's a little bit easier. So I'm in favor, and I like the idea. I don't like the idea of it coming to T committee, but I like the idea of
Public Works.
yeah, Bob's not here. We'll give it some Public Works.
Bob.
I like the idea of you having to approve the streets by resolution, just as you do oversized vehicles and anything else. It's a consistent standard that I think makes sense.
Very good. Any other comments, questions? Okay, seeing none, with this item, I want to thank, again, Mr. Rue's office for being represented here, Justin, and the residents and the operators. Appreciate your presence and your testimony. We will approve item 1 as amended and send that to City Council. When is that going to come to Council, Mr. Clerk?
Council members, I'll work with your office, set a date for that.
Okay, very good. Okay, with that, that'll be the order, and we are now adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.
So you're saying He's got a number of girl